Many people have asked us, when we tour Europe, the US and Canada and so on, are you going to have your Tahrir Square moment? I always wondered about the square. You know, Americans are so bad in geography. It's a circle, for God's sake. It's not a square. But anyway, we'll forgive them. They have many other problems. Afghanistan, Pakistan. We'll forgive them for that. Anyway, will you have your Tahrir Square moment? And my answer is that I don't think so. But we're having our South Africa moment. We've been having our South Africa moment since the beginning of this boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Why is that? I think because the main thing about the BDS call is that it united the great majority of the Palestinian people on the three principles, the three basic rights under international law. Ending the 1967 occupation with the colonization, the wall, and so on. Ending Israel's system of racial discrimination or apartheid, which is not discussed in the West, and having full equality for the Palestinian people who are citizens of Israel. And third, the right of return, which Hind had mentioned, and Dr. Karma, which is extremely important. It's extremely important because the majority of the Palestinian people are refugees. People forget that. So those saying, we are in solidarity with the Palestinian people, we want to end the occupation only. You know, the right of return and equality in Israel, that's not really our concern. Those people are not in solidarity with the Palestinian people, they're in solidarity with themselves. Because ending the occupation does not address the problems of the great majority of the Palestinian people. It is simply not enough. 2/3 of our people are refugees. They will not gain much by ending the occupation alone. So ending the occupation is a very necessary first step. It's not the end. We do not exercise our right to self-determination when occupation ends. We must see an end to apartheid in Israel, and we must see the return of our refugees. Without that, there's no self-determination for the Palestinian people. Self-determination means we get to decide, as the oppressed, what we need from you. You get to decide whether you can help us or not, but you do not put words in our mouth and say, this is what you really want. We're not native idiots who cannot express ourselves. Believe us, we have average or above intelligence, we're quite rational, and we know exactly what we want. Self-determination. Now I want to quote President Obama. He said something recently which was interesting. He said, innocent people were targeted for killing. Hospitals and ambulances were attacked. Supplies of food and fuel were choked off. Water for hundreds of thousands of people was shut off. Cities and towns were shelled, mosques were destroyed, apartment buildings reduced to rubble. Military jets and helicopter gunships were unleashed upon people who had no means to defend themselves against assaults from the air. No, he's not giving up on his second term for presidency. He wasn't talking about Gaza. He's talking about Libya. But what he said, word for word, applies for Gaza. But this double standard treats Palestinians as lesser humans, because our victimizers are the superhumans. So we must be lesser humans, relative humans. Our rights do not count. A no-fly zone can be applied to Libya, but not Gaza for heaven's sake. We cannot have a no-fly zone on Gaza. So it's this reduction of the Palestinian. But Gaza, one can say, Israel was simply retaliating. As in the recent attacks on Gaza, we heard this term, Associated Press, of course, Reuters and so on. Israel retaliated to a Hamas attack on some bus that it apologized for and so on. It's always this word retaliation. Is it retaliation? When you have occupation, ethnic cleansing, and siege, that is the beginning of all violence. We retaliate. The oppressors take action of violence and initiate all violence. But regardless, any human life lost is a human life too many. And to end all violence, you have to take out the roots of violence: Israel's occupation, ethnic cleansing, and denial of refugee rights. So whether it's occupation, apartheid, or denial of refugee rights, the BDS campaign is growing worldwide, given this descent into fascism. Just recently, the University of Johannesburg has severed links with Ben Gurion University. And that's the first real academic boycott success we've had since 6 years. Let's celebrate our victories as well. Company that the BDS campaign has targeted very carefully since the end of 2008 is Veolia, a French company that's building the Jerusalem Light Rail, the tram connecting illegal settlements with the city of Jerusalem. Since November 2008 until now, Veolia has lost contracts worth more than $10 billion. So thanks to all the solidarity groups that made this victory happen. And across the world, most trade unions are joining the BDS movement. The biggest, most enormous victory in the trade union movement came a few weeks ago when CUT, the Brazilian Trade Union Federation, representing some 20 million workers, joined the BDS movement. So we're very proud of our Brazilian. And I can go on and on how BDS is empowering people in solidarity to do something about their anger about Israel's oppression of the Palestinians, to do something effective that can bring concrete results, to end the fragmentation, to end Israel's impunity, and to bring back our basic rights. I'll just end in the 3 minutes I have with a wish I have for our Western solidarity friends and colleagues. I wish you Egypt. I wish you Egypt so you can decolonize your minds, for only then can you envision real liberty, justice, equality, and dignity. I wish you Egypt so you can tear apart the sheet with the multiple choice question, what do you want? For all the answers you're given are dead wrong. Your only choice there seems to be between evil and the lesser one. I wish you Egypt so you can, like the Tunisians, the Egyptians, the Bahrainis, and certainly the Palestinians, shout no. We do not want to select the least wrong answer. We want another choice altogether that is not on your damned list. Given the choice between slavery and death, we unequivocally opt for freedom and dignified life. No slavery and no death. I wish you Egypt so you can rekindle the spirit of the South African anti-apartheid struggle by holding Israel accountable to international law and universal principles of human rights, by adopting boycott, divestment and sanctions, called for by a great majority of Palestinian civil society. There's no more effective, non-violent way to end Israel's occupation, racial discrimination and denial of refugee rights than BDS. I wish you Egypt so you can fulfill your country's legal and moral obligations to help rebuild the ravished, de-developed economies and societies of your former or current colonies, so that their young men can find their own homelands viable, livable, and lovable again, instead of risking death or worse on the high seas to reach your mirage-washed shores. Given up loved ones and a place they once called home, you see they're here in the West, they're there, because you were there and we all know what you did there. Our oppression and yours are deeply interrelated and intertwined. It is never a zero-sum game. After Egypt, it is our time. It is time for Palestinian freedom, justice, and self-determination. It is time for the working people of the world, particularly the most exploited and downtrodden, to reassert our common humanity and reclaim control over our common destiny. I wish you Egypt.